What's going on, guys, and welcome back. So in the last video you've seen we were having a little bit of trouble with changing the alternator bracket on Onyx here, but of course you've seen where we got everything fixed, got it pretty much put back together. So today we are going to be taking and getting this wiring harness extended and getting a new cable on it. I actually got a little bit bigger gauge wire cable, so hopefully it'll be a little bit more stable, you know, with charging and stuff like that, and maybe it'd be a little bit easier on the alternator. I don't know, I'm not an electrician, I don't really know how it works, but I did go with a little bit bigger gauge wire. So what we're gonna do is get started by cutting that, routing it down, getting it to the alternator, and extending, or not extending, but putting the longer cable on for the charging system. And hopefully by the end of this video we'll have Onyx running and be able to do some driving around and making sure he's all good. Alright, so after a couple of trips to O'Reilly's in the shop to get a couple tools and stuff, everything's back together and it looks pretty good, if I do say so myself. The aftermarket bracket definitely looks a lot better with that brand new shiny alternator down there. I still got to tighten up the one bolt right here that goes through to the head. And I'm gonna take and do something a little bit different here with this zip tie. Even though it doesn't look terrible, I'm probably gonna take one of those like D-loop clips and bolt it to the head here so it holds it up and just, you know, from flopping around, getting on the sway bar and stuff. But the belt is nice and tight, and I think we're pretty much ready for a fire up here. We should be able to start it. Also got to put the coolant reservoir in. I haven't done that yet, but that'll only take a second. Well, at least it's back alive again. Everything seems to be doing what it's supposed to do. I got the coolant in there. It still needs to be topped off a little bit. Just sort of check for some leaks. I don't see anything right off the rip, so that's good. Yeah, everything seems to be looking fine. Well, that's a positive so far. So we don't have much gas in them at all, so we're gonna take and probably go to the store, get some fuel, because this thing it's on E. And whenever it says it's on the red line, it's out. I've already ran it out of fuel once on accident, but luckily I was at the shop. Let's see what the voltage is. This said it was charging a minute ago. Let's just continue to make sure. Battery voltage, right there at 14 volts. That's good enough for me. She's pretty much out of fuel. And my nitrous pressure gauge ain't working. It's weird. Huh. Well, I'll have to figure that out now. Never mind, I figured it out. Whenever I was taking and messing around with the alternator fuses and stuff, I accidentally pulled the fuse for the interior lights, which is what I had that sort of wired into. And yeah, it just didn't have a fuse in it, so that was simple enough. And we got some decent bottom pressure, 900 pounds. It's not bad. Might have to make a hit or two, just depends. So I just went and drove and got gas, and we're having a little bit of issues with the temperature. So you can't see, it's getting up to the 240 range. So either the thermostat, I'm gonna go ahead and cut it off, but so either the thermostat's open and it doesn't have enough coolant in it, or the belt is slipping a little bit, which is, you can hear it squeak a little bit, and it is not turning the water pump fast enough. So we're gonna see what's going on. It should be fine. It's probably just a little bit low on coolant, because I drained pretty much every bit of it out and only put maybe a gallon and a half, 2, and it filled it up. But if that thermostat opened up and it filled up the block, the radiator's of course gonna be low. So we're gonna see what's going on, let her cool off for a little bit, and it'll probably be dark by then, but we'll let you know. Oh, and also one good thing about this setup is I actually got to use the factory battery wire. So all I did was, instead of running it over the top like they do from the factory, I took and run it down underneath the oil pan and zip tied it up, and then ran it to the alternator, and it fits fine. So I'm actually pretty happy with that. So what we're gonna do is check over everything, make sure we don't have any leak or oil leaks or anything like that. It should be fine. And we're gonna double check the coolant, of course, after we let it cool off for a little while, and maybe tighten the belt up a little bit. I may even have to get a little bit shorter belt. So I got the car running. I know you can hear it in the background. I actually took and did have to add about another gallon of water to it. So probably what was happening was the coolant was a little low. No big deal there. And also I did have to change the belt. If you guys do get this kit, this is the belt you're gonna want. There's a part number right there if you wanna pause the video. It's a 78 and a 16th inch belt. You do have to sort of stretch it on a little bit, but you want it that tight because the adjustment rods on the alternator bracket aren't very long. so you don't have much room to adjust. So I went with the shortest belt as I could possibly go so I could get it as tight as possible without having to max out my tensioner. What I'm gonna do is let this thing run and make sure the temperature and everything is all good and make sure there's no leaks like I said earlier. So what I'm probably gonna do is actually pick the video up probably tomorrow because it's getting dark out. As you can tell, it's almost dark now. That way we can get some in-car footage of the car tomorrow. All right, so I'm picking this video up like a week later. I don't really remember where I left the video off, but I think it was where the car was getting over temperature or too hot. And the reason was, I think I said in the video, it was a little low on coolant, and that's actually what it was. It needed like another gallon after the thermostat opened up. So no big deal, put that in there, and it's been good. So with that being said, let's get in the car and go for a little drive. Test drive now, see how everything's doing. I did end up having to tighten up the belt a little bit. I don't know if you can hear it, but it still has a little bit of a chirp to it. It's not terrible, but it's still probably gonna have to tighten it up a little bit more. It gets a little bit better once you drive it and it gets hot. It sort of goes away. Good so far, about 13.8 to 14.0, or at least that's what my Holley Sniper Dash is telling me right now. It's anywhere from 13.8 to 14.0, kind of fluctuating out and back, but that's pretty good. Actually added another ground from the head to the chassis, because I was getting some voltage drop issues on the initial start. Like whenever you go to crank the car, it would drop to around 10 to 10.5 volts, which is kind of normal. But I added another ground to see if it would help the voltage drop less and help the starter to sort of turn over a little faster, and it helped a little bit, but it didn't take care of everything. But also, the battery that I have in here is not the greatest battery in the world. Okay, so while we're driving around, I figured I could give my thoughts on it so far. Other than the little bit of a chirp it's got, which that's my fault. I actually really like the bracket. It frees up a lot of space for better valve covers, because the stock valve covers, once you go into your aftermarket polylock roller rockers and stuff like that, it gets into a clearance issue. And then if you try to run a taller valve cover, unfortunately with the stock bracket, it gets in the way, and you either have to ground the front of the valve cover down, or find a valve cover that fits, that has like an angle on the front of the valve cover to sort of angle it away from the alternator without having to grind the alternator and or the valve cover. So clearance is a plus, but another thing that's kind of on the downside of it is the location of it. It is pretty low, and the only thing about that I'm kind of worried about is driving in the rain, like a really heavy rainstorm. If the alternator, you know, of course, if the alternator gets really wet while it's charging, that's not a good thing. For one, it can kill the voltage regulator, short the alternator out, and cause, you know, the alternator to go bad. Now, my buddy John, he has one on his car, which I showed you in the last video, I believe. He's got a 351 swap silver SN95, and he drives his around all the time. And so far, he hasn't had any issues with driving it in the rain, causing any alternator problems or things like that. But that would be my only concern, driving in a heavy rainstorm and possibly shorten the alternator out, you know, getting it wet. I'm not worried about getting it wet if it's just sitting there, nothing turned on, no power or anything, because it's not going to hurt anything. You know, the alternator will dry out and it's fine. Now, if you don't have a problem like what I had, which was the bolt broke off in the block, it's a really easy install. It maybe would take, honestly, 20 to 30 minutes just taking your time. Oh, and if you got the right size belt. That's kind of an issue. It doesn't give you a belt length to go by, like, because my car has a AC delete and a smog pump delete. But the belt I used on this is a 78 and a 16th inch belt, and it fits really well. It's a little tight going on with the adjuster all the way in, but that's how I wanted it to go to start with, because the adjusters aren't that long. I mean, they're long enough, don't get me wrong. They have plenty of adjustment, but I didn't want to take and max the adjusters out to where there's only 2 or 3 threads left in there. And, you know, that could cause another issue too with long-term fatigue. It could break the end off of the adjuster, or break the threads off, or just pull the threads out. So I went with something as short as I could possibly get, to where the adjusters didn't have to be, you know, ran out so far. Doing pretty good so far. Let's do a little, I don't know, second gear roll on
belt doesn't just fly off.
I swear guys, here lately I've had a lot of issues with memory cards corrupting. Anyways, after that last clip, somehow the footage got corrupted, and so now I'm finishing this video off here. I know this video has jumped around a lot. I do apologize, but as you can tell, Onyx is back to his normal self. He's doing really good. But that is gonna do it for this video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and if you did, smashing that like button would really help me out, and I'd really appreciate it. And in the next video you guys see, we're gonna be doing something pretty cool for Onyx, so definitely stay tuned for the next video. Also, if you're enjoying the content that you are seeing, be sure to hit the subscribe button down below, turn on the notification bell, that way you can stay up to date with all the videos that will be coming out on Onyx and some of the other cool projects we got on the channel. But until next time, we'll see you later.